it's funny to me how so often students get terribly, terribly confused and stressed out over writing a hypothesis or a thesis statement. I think we can turn it into a really, really big deal. And when you look at what some of the great history writing does around the world, the hypothesis statement is really important, but not always a big deal. I don't know why we have to brain explosion over it all the time. I'll throw this to you to think about as we go through this video. We often talk about a peel, or sometimes I talk about a PEEP structure for a body paragraph, where you make your point, you elaborate upon it, you use some evidence, and then you either link to the next paragraph or you return to the point again. So either peel or PEEP. The P is very important and central to a paragraph of the body of an essay. If you like, a hypothesis, thesis statement as it's often called, a hypothesis is your P, your point, for the entire essay. And every paragraph that uses its peel and PEEP, every paragraph is essentially the elaboration and evidence for the hypothesis of the whole essay. So you've got mini P's in the paragraphs that support the big P, the big point of the whole essay, and that big point is called the hypothesis. So all we're sort of doing now is going, how do I write a good P statement for an entire essay? Well, look, let's go to the experts. I'd love to take you to these places. Have a look at these places where the experts are working. Bam. I'm going to take you firstly to Bowdoin, which is in Massachusetts, just outside Boston, and Harvard, outside Boston. Both of these American universities, colleges, do some amazing work in history methodology. They're fabulous. In fact, Harvard takes resources off the Bowdoin Bears and says, all right, I'll do that. So you might go, look, I'm sure you've all heard of Harvard, and if you haven't, you really need to get out more. But Bowdoin, most people haven't heard of it, but I'm sure you have heard of Netflix. The founder of Netflix went to Bowdoin. So what? Just a guy who runs one of those massive new media companies went there. Well, this place was established in 1784, and there's been US presidents who've been there, members of the US cabinet, there have been major business minds, there's media minds. It's a pretty special university, and it's amazingly beautiful. That's Radcliffe Court, by the way, at Harvard in the bottom photograph there. So if you're wanting to go to Harvard at all, you might want to pop into there. Now, one of the things that you may want to do when you get to Harvard involves sort of touching a statue there, and it's worth investigating that little tradition, and you may not want to kiss it or lick the statue because it's a bit icky. All right. So, a little bit of trivia there, but get out and go and see Harvard. Why don't you even dream of going there one day? What an amazing thing you could do. So, this is where I'm drawing my source material from. They do good work. Okay, so let's go to Harvard first. Harvard is fabulous. They've told us what a hypothesis looks like. And in America, they often call it a thesis statement, and I actually quite like that wording rather than hypothesis. But hey, who am I? I've got to put up with everyone calls it a hypothesis in Australian schools, so we're going to call it a hypothesis. But in America, Harvard call it a thesis statement. Okay, so here's this statement you're going to write. And look at the way they start off. They're saying if you're a member of a jury listening to a lawyer making an open argument like you do in your American TV shows, you want to know very soon whether the lawyer believes the client is guilty or not guilty. And you kind of want to know how the lawyer plans to convince you. Well, imagine your reader of your essay is the jury. They want to know what your argument is arguing, your essay is arguing, and they want to know how you, the writer, plans to make that argument. After reading your opening statement, and think about it, if you've been watching TV shows like Suits, think about those legal arguments in an American TV show. after getting your opening argument, your thesis statement, your hypothesis, the reader should be there going, as they say in this little reading, this essay is going to convince me of something. I'm not convinced yet, but I'm interested to see how I might be convinced. So, a few points. The thesis can't be just something that can be answered with a simple yes or no. It's not a topic, it's not a fact, nor is it really an opinion. Okay? It has two parts. It should tell what you're planning to argue, and it should be hinting at, telegraphing at, foreshadowing how you plan to argue it. So have a little bit of a think about that. Have a look at a bit of the reading there. Get your head around it. And let's break it down a bit more. And I think Beaudoin might do that for us. Beaudoin tells us what a thesis looks like. We've got to write it, so we've got to imagine what it looks like. If this is the P, the point that you're supporting all the way through your essay, what's it look like? Well, firstly, your thesis point, your hypothesis, is the controlling idea around which everything in your paper revolves. Often Beaudoin would say to their students that a thesis explains why or how something happened. Look at that second sentence of highlighted work there. Every word of your paper's aiming to support that thesis. Every word. Nothing's wasted. Everything's there to support your thesis. Imagine you're in an American courtroom, you're presenting your case, and you've got a judge there saying, come to the point, counsellor, don't keep going on, don't waffle, come to the point. Okay? So let's think about how you get to that point. Firstly, they're saying in this next paragraph, this thesis statement should be contained in a single sentence, concise, grammatically correct. I'd say it's very carefully worded. You have to be succinct, to the point. In an essay exam, the thesis is a one-sentence answer to the question that is put to you, the task that's put to you, and the remainder of the paper proves that thesis. They're saying the thesis is an intellectual and academic argument that's being prosecuted. Beaudoin tell their students to take a stand. Be brave. Nothing wishy-washy, nothing too safe. Make a stand on a historical issue or a problem. Develop then a coherent, persuasive line of thought that convinces your reader that you've made a valid stand. So you make a stand and then back that stand up. Convince the reader that what you've taken a stand on, what you've been brave on, is warranted. That you're on solid ground. So you're taking a risk, being brave, going beyond the facts, pushing out into new territory of knowledge, and then securing the ground on which you're standing. I love that kind of idea. History is one of the few subjects at school where you get to play with ideas intellectually and push into a new space. I love that sort of stuff. It's exciting to write a hypothesis or a thesis. Okay? Your thesis is a concise statement of where you stand on an issue. Now, they're using the word argument, and I suggest that your body is full of arguments to support your hypothesis, so I'm being a bit careful in using that word. But I love the ideas in there. So let's look at a few examples. I've got the top one's from Beaudoin, and the bottom two are from Harvard. And you can see that they're both historically structured, they're both different issues, and they're both university level writing. But, you know, they're different anyway. So look, the Beaudoin one. What's interesting in there is a lot of people think that you must have a because statement. And I thought, well, actually, Beaudoin have got a statement that's using kind of a because, but they say for. Legal disenfranchisement did not begin until 12 years after the end of Reconstruction, for it took an economic downturn in the South and the coming of age of the first generation of Southern African Americans born in freedom to trigger the legal efforts to keep blacks away from the polls. So if I put the word because where they've got for, it would still work. Or if I put due to with a little bit of tinkering, it would work. Or if I put the word as, it would probably still work. So for, because, due to, as, these work. When you're looking at that Baudouin hypothesis or thesis statement, I think you can see what the arguments of the writer are going to be. I think there's going to be it took the economic downturn in the South and the coming of age of a generation for the legal efforts to keep blacks away from the polls to be triggered. So I think they've got two arguments. So if I was imagining that diagram I've previously said would be an introduction with all the good stuff in an intro, argument 1, argument 2. And the argument 1 would be economic downturn in the South. Argument 2 would be the coming of age of the first generation of South. There we are. Okay, and then they're going to have Peel coming out of that. I see what they're doing. Okay. Let's have a look at the second hypothesis example here on the screen, the Harvard one. Michael Dukakis, and I don't know why they're so into Michael Dukakis. Michael Dukakis was a Democrat who ran for president in 1988. He lost. Michael Dukakis lost the 1988 presidential election because he failed to campaign vigorously after the DNC, Democratic National Convention. It's not a fact. It's a stand they're making on an issue. It's got a time. Doesn't really have a place, but because Michael Dukakis is so well-known American and the DNC is an American thing and they're an American university, I think it works. But Michael Dukakis lost because there's a fairly straight diagram happening there, and there's your cause statement in there. He lost the election due to the. He lost as a result of. So we can see that sort of structure. But let's look at this last one here. It's a bit different. It's what we call a concessional hypothesis. It starts with while, but others would start with although and despite and even though and whilst. Okay? So while Dukakis's soft on crime image hurt his chances in the 1988 election, his failure to campaign vigorously after the DNC bore a greater responsibility for his defeat. So in this case, I've got probably two arguments. His soft on crime image, but the more important issue, his failure to campaign vigorously after the convention. So again, I can see hypothesis, argument 1, argument 2. Think about how it's coming together. Notice in that last one, quite a good hypothesis. Doesn't mention a place, but let's let that one go because of the way America's doing it. And it is Harvard, so we'll give them a free pass on that one. We won't pull them up too much. I'm not going to write Harvard a nasty email about not having a place in there. But we can see it doesn't have the because statement, and it's still quite a strong historical stand on an issue that needs to be backed up, has arguments to it, and so on. So think about what a hypothesis needs to have in it, and let's look at the next example. We're back to the draft or the mock-up introduction that we've put together and spoken about previously. Let's identify that hypothesis again. There it is. Does it take a historical stand on an issue? Does it define a time and a place? Do I get a sense of where this argument's going to take me? Have we moved beyond a fact? Have we suggested a case that we're going to prosecute here? I think we'll find the answer is yes. Is it the controlling idea? I think it does. It seems to drive everything in that paragraph. And when you read the essay that goes with it, I think it drives every idea after it. It controls the entire essay. Is it a concise statement like Baudouin and Harvard tell us to have? Does it tell the reader what we're going to argue, and does it telegraph how it'll be argued? I'm going to argue it does. Does it take a stand? Is it brave? Does it move beyond the safe has to be absolutely right? Is this more than just a fact? Does it attempt to present a coherent, persuasive line of argument? I think it does. It's telling us this is an argument. Does it present or attempt to present a coherent, persuasive line of argument in order to prove its validity? I think it does. So, what I want you to think about is how you write your hypothesis, particularly under exam conditions. If I had just said in this case, the Nazis transformed Germany from a representative democracy to a totalitarian state between 1919 and 1933, full stop, that would be just a fact. But by saying they utilised a range of strategies and tactics which were well suited to the conditions, now we've got an argument. Now we've got something brave. Now we've got an idea to prosecute.